It's almost like, if you think about it rationally, it's such a bizarre story that you could get 3/4 of the states to stop the manufacture and sale of alcoholic beverages, but it happened.
On January 17, 1920, the United States Congress approved and enacted the soon-to-be-repealed 18th Amendment, proving to generations of Americans yet to come that the writers of the Constitution were far from infallible. During the mid to late 1800s, the temperance movement gained traction. The temperance movement aimed to stop the sale, creation, consumption, and overall use of alcohol in the United States.
The statue itself once stood right in front of this building right here, this pink building, and at the base of it was a store called the Apex Liquor Store. So it was kind of ironic that the statue itself, which meant to espouse temperance and abstinence from alcohol altogether, eventually ended up in front of a liquor store.
Many prominent groups involved in temperance were the evangelical group, primarily composed of women of the time, and the Anti-Saloon League, which was founded in Ohio in 1893. Most women who supported the temperance movement did so because they believed that husbands who drank less were better fathers and husbands, as well as workers and models for society.
Whole group of people who felt like they'd lost control of their country and wanted to take it back. These and many, many other themes resonated throughout Prohibition, and so
The Anti-Saloon League primarily advocated for temperance by working with legislators and voters. They cared less about people who consumed alcohol and more about people who had a say in politics who were against the consumption of alcohol. The growth of the temperance movement led to a growth in their support and base. This ultimately culminated in the legislation of the 18th Amendment, which was passed on January 17th of 1920. It was originally vetoed by President Wilson, but the veto was overridden by both the House of Representatives and the Senate. After the 18th Amendment was enacted, organized crime grew by a significant amount. This was related mostly to the underground buying and selling of alcohol during the 13-year period while the 18th Amendment was in place as active constitutional law. On December 5th, 1933, the 21st Amendment was ratified, which repealed the 18th Amendment. This is the only case of an amendment that repeals another amendment in the Constitution. I believe the 18th Amendment is the perfect example of tyranny of the masses. If the temperance movement hadn't gained traction and gained support due to its widespread use of what is essentially misinformation, it would never have been made into law that alcohol could not be sold or consumed in the United States. And it could have erased from our history the embarrassment of having to repeal one of our own amendments.
And how Americans could have made such a limiting decision of creating an amendment, the only amendment that limits human freedom, and then of course the only amendment that's been repealed. And the more we got into it, the more we understood that it touched dozens of elements today, that had...
The 18th Amendment serves as a perfect example as to the infallibility of our lawmakers. People, no matter what their job, whether that is senators, members of Congress, the president even, are still people, and they make mistakes. It also speaks to the problems with a democratic government as a whole, where people caught up in trends such as temperance can make changes that are very difficult to undo to federal law, and that can be very dangerous.
Is the opportunity to remind our fellow citizens that history is still that table around which you can have a civil discourse, that quite often, as we hear in conversations here and elsewhere, the discourse has sort of retreated to individual camps.
In conclusion, the 18th Amendment is important to me because it serves as an example to all Americans that our government is not perfect. In fact, it's far from it. If we want our government to get better, we have to work at it ourselves. We have to understand that we can make mistakes, that our government can make mistakes, and that we as a people need to recognize those mistakes and remedy them.